Hi again guys, and welcome to another Special Projects Replica build, and this time we're kind of running a fine line between replicas and custom builds, because this is partially a replica, but also partially having fun with what could have been, because as you'll have, of course, seen from the title, this is a replica of General Lee, from Dukes of Hazzard, the classic Dodge Charger 440, and the reason why, as a replica, this actually isn't as cool as you'd probably want it to be, at least if you followed the real car completely, is that the real thing is, as far as experts can tell, the exact same as a stock Charger. It's just painted orange, it's got some body upgrades, but the engine, the weight, is basically just stock. It appears with a number of different gearbox alterations throughout the different series of Dukes of Hazzard, but apart from that, nothing really changes mechanically. So we've taken a little bit of a liberty with it. I haven't gone insane on the power. We're actually running the same power as the real General Lee, aka the stock power, but we've had a bit of fun with the suspension setup, the gearbox setup in particular, and also the weight. Now, as far as the visuals, you haven't really got much to change. You can't fit it with a race number, which is a real shame because it needs that. But you can of course change the rims if you want to. I, however, have left them stock because I think the stock rims look really good. And most importantly, of course, for General Lee is the colour. Now, there are a number of different oranges available on GT6, but I've gone for the orange that comes from the McLaren MP412C, which is pretty much the brightest orange in the game as far as I've found so far. And it looks great on this car. So that's what I've gone for the colour, and that's what I've done basically for the visuals. I haven't done anything else to it. So we'll go now, of course, to the mechanical setup, and then obviously take it out to a track to see if it's fun to drive. Now obviously, this is not a competition build. This is not designed for racing or really competition of any kind, although it does make a good drift car and you can technically use it as a rally car as well if you want to. It has good suspension for that. But I have rounded it off, as you can see, to 490 pp, which isn't the most practical of pp levels, but it works out well with the settings that I've used. If you don't want to round it off though, you'll see in just a second, particularly when we get to the power, that you have a couple of different options. Now I've gone for sport soft tyres, but obviously that'll be down to personal preference. I have upgraded the brakes on this one just to make it feel even better, obviously around corners. Again, you don't have to do that. Technically that's not authentic, but neither is the car in general in the way that we're replicating it, so it depends if you want to do that or not. For the suspension, I've raised the ride height to 160mm front and rear. The springs we've reduced down as low as possible, as with the dampers and anti-roll, and the reason for that is because one of the coolest things about old school muscle cars is that wallowy steering, and especially when you see that in a movie, the way the cars duck and roll around corners and under acceleration and braking looks awesome. With the stock suspension, you get that to some degree. With race suspension, not so much. So, you could just leave it stock, but I prefer to do the settings myself, so it just depends what you want. I've opted for neutral camber and tow, because you just don't need it. We'll come back to the gearbox in just a second. I've gone for the twin plate clutch, because you don't really need the triple plate. You haven't got enough power and torque to really justify that. We've got the carbon prop shaft, and then as far as the diff, obviously you've got a few different options. If you want it to be better as a track car, and quicker around corners rather than just fun and drifty, then I'd put the initial torque to 30 and acceleration and braking as low as possible. If, however, you want it to be good at drifting and holding a drift, then do what I've done here, which is halfway on initial torque, and then all the way for acceleration and braking. Now, as far as power, technically speaking, you don't need to do anything to it. Just leave it with the power that it has from the dealership. But I deliberately fitted this one with an oil change because, of course, some people may already have this car and may want to do the tune. But what if you've already done the oil change? Well, you can't reverse that. So that means that if you've already done the oil change and my tune is different, you've got to shell out another 75 grand for a new car. That's not fun. So I have done the oil change so that we can work around that. So if you haven't bought one yet, just don't do anything to it. If you already own one and it has an oil change, then follow what I've done here. Now, as I said, as far as PP, you don't have to have it rounded off. As you can see, I fitted the sports computer and intake tuning. You don't necessarily need to do that. That is only if you want the PP to round off to 490. If you don't fit those things, then the PP will be different, but it's just not as practical. It doesn't really matter, but personally I just like it that way. So it depends if you want to. So if you do want it as I've got it, just do what you see there, reduce it down to 84.2%. Then as far as the weight, which is where we've taken the biggest interpretation of the car, because of course the real car's weight would have been basically stock with a little bit of a change. We've gone for the full weight loss package, just to increase the fun factor. And then finally for the gearbox, obviously it's not a straight line tune as such, but you do at least want a bit more top speed for when you want to use it. So we've got an auto setting of 180, then individual gears of 2.5, 1.6, 1150, 875 and 0.7 with a final drive of 3.5. So that's it for the setup, with plenty of room for variation as usual. But now let's take it out to a track, a twisty track, to see just how fun it is. Overall, of course, as I mentioned, this is by far more important to being a fun car than it is a fast car. Speed is not the point of this vehicle, not at all, so don't expect to necessarily win races with it. As I said, you can use it as a pretty decent rally car if you do fit those tyres, but generally speaking it's designed for the road, and as you can see with the settings that I've used, especially with the diff and the low weight in particular, it really loves to drift. With the particular diff settings that I'm running, it's very easy to hold a drift, it's very easy to drift with it in general, very beginner friendly. You don't need to be the best of drifters to be able to get it sideways around a corner and hold it. So overall, if you do decide to use this movie kind of semi-replica with a bit of a liberty taken with it, then obviously have fun with it, and we will be doing more movie cars like this in the future. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.